Imagine waking up to an emergency alert on your phone while the streets outside are already filled with chaos. A real zombie apocalypse would not look like a movie. It would be a total failure of modern infrastructure. Within hours, the supply chains that bring food to your local grocery store would completely stop moving forever. Most people would die in the first wave because they are too reliant on a system that is dead. You are not a hero in this story. You are just another person fighting for a single clean gallon of water. Governments would collapse as soon as the virus reached the dense population centers of the major world cities. To survive the first night, you would need to be cold, fast, and willing to leave everything behind. The virus would spread through our global flight networks before the first city even realized it was under attack. A single infected person on a plane could spark an outbreak on 3 different continents in one single day. Modern medicine would be useless against a pathogen that turns a living human into a mindless and aggressive predator. Traditional hospitals would become the most dangerous places on Earth within the first 48 hours of the outbreak. Doctors and nurses will be the first to fall as they try to treat a disease they cannot understand. This is not a slow burn. It is a vertical spike of infection that bypasses all our social defenses. Every major city would become a massive death trap of concrete and glass as the power grid goes dark. You would quickly realize that your biggest threat is not the undead, but the other desperate people around you. Panic turns ordinary neighbors into violent looters who will kill you for a single can of canned soup. The social contract disappears the moment the police realize they cannot protect their own families from the rising tide. You would have to decide if you're going to help others or stay silent and completely hidden away. Most people would choose to hoard resources and barricade their doors until the water and the power finally fail. There is no coming back from this level of societal breakdown once the fear takes a permanent hold. Your moral compass will be the first thing you have to throw away to stay alive in this nightmare. Communication would vanish as the cell towers fail and the internet becomes a ghost town of old data. You would be trapped in a bubble of silence, not knowing if the rest of the world still exists. Rumors and misinformation would spread faster than the virus itself, leading people into traps and very dangerous situations. Without a radio or a working satellite link, you are effectively blind to the movements of the undead. You would have to rely on your own eyes and ears to navigate a world that is rotting. Every noise in the dark becomes a potential death sentence that you cannot afford to ignore or forget. The silence of the world would be the most terrifying part of this new and violent reality tonight. The environment would start to reclaim the cities as the fires burn without anyone to put them out now. High-rise buildings would become hollow skeletons of steel after the gas lines explode and the glass starts to break. Nature does not care about your survival. It will just continue to grow over the ruins of your life. Within months, the streets would be filled with water and debris that makes travel nearly impossible for a human. You would have to learn to hunt and gather in a landscape that was once a shopping mall. The main character fantasy of being a survivor would be crushed by the reality of starvation and disease. Most survivors would be the ones who were lucky enough to be away from the cities when it all began. A real apocalypse is a slow and grueling process of watching everything you love disappear into the gray mist. You would spend your days searching for medicine and clean water while avoiding the gaze of the hungry dead. Every scratch or minor injury becomes a life-threatening emergency because there are no more antibiotics or clean clinics. The zombies are just a background noise to the constant and crushing weight of your own basic survival needs. You are part of a dying species that is being replaced by a more efficient and mindless version today. There is no cure coming, and there is no military force that can save the entire broken world. The story of humanity ends with a quiet whimper in a world that has moved on without us. The cooling systems of nuclear power plants would eventually fail without human engineers to keep them running properly. This would lead to multiple meltdowns that release radioactive clouds across the abandoned and empty countryside for years. You would have to navigate a world that is not only crawling with zombies, but also poisoned by radiation. Clean soil and water would become more valuable than gold, or any currency that used to matter to you. The few survivors left would be forced into a nomadic lifestyle, always moving to avoid the toxic rain clouds. Survival would become a mathematical equation where every calorie spent must be replaced by a risky and dangerous find. The world would become a silent, glowing graveyard where the living are just shadows waiting for the end. Weaponry would become limited to whatever you can maintain without a factory or specialized gun shop nearby. Ammo would run out within the first year, forcing survivors to use crude clubs and sharpened metal pipes instead. Combat would become intimate and disgusting, requiring you to smell the rot of every enemy you have to kill. You would have to get used to the sound of bone breaking and the feeling of cold blood on your hands. There are no cinematic headshots in this reality, just messy and exhausting fights for your very own life. Every encounter would leave you physically drained and mentally scarred by the things you were forced to do. The glamour of the apocalypse would vanish under the weight of the dirt and the constant smell of death. Domesticated animals would either starve in their homes or revert to a wild and aggressive state to survive. Packs of former house dogs would roam the streets, competing with the zombies for whatever meat is left behind. You would no longer be at the top of the food chain in your own suburban neighborhood anymore. The sound of barking would be a warning that a pack of hungry predators is closing in on you. Even the animals you used to trust would become a threat in this new and lawless world of blood and fear. Nature would reset itself, and humans would be relegated to the status of clever but very vulnerable prey. The world would return to a state of primal balance where only the strongest and smartest can survive. The winter months would be the true killers of the remaining human population left in the cold north. Without heating or insulated clothing, the cold would take more lives than the zombies ever could in a month. You would be trapped in a dark room, shivering and listening to the dead scratching at the frozen door. Your world would shrink down to the size of a single fire and the few people you trust. Every day would be a battle against the elements and the crushing despair of a world that is already dead. There is no hope for a better tomorrow, only the hope of seeing the sun one more time. The final chapters of the human story would be written in the snow and the ice of a dying world.